Physical dangers. The vapor is heavier than air and may travel along the ground. Distant ignition possible. The vapor mixes well with air. Explosive mixtures are formed easily. God, crazy.
I've juiced some really strong ginger. I feel like that would apply too. Coughing, red eyes, explosive.
Clear the room.
It's another Friday. This week I did it my way. I made lots of juice, and now I feel a boost. Baby say, oh, it's the way I make my juice. Pressing fruits and roots. This week I did it my way. Baby say, oh, now let's have some fun. There is nothing greater than Fridays at Goodnature.
Woo! Welcome everybody to Goodnature Radio, episode 7. This is your host, Charlie Wettlaufer, joined by my esteemed co-host. The reason I say esteemed so carefully now is because, like, on the first or second episode, I said it quickly and it sounded like I said, like, steamy or something. Like, joined by my steamy co-host. Joined by my esteemed co-host, Chef Ari Sexner, the #1 juicing consultant in the world and author of The Juicing Companion. And, of course, the wonderful Olivia Esquivel, founder and owner of Southern Press Juicery, a wild crafted collection. The only person I know that makes being a soccer mom look cool.
Appreciate it.
Goodnature Radio is the weekly Friday podcast where the juicing industry comes to get help with starting and growing a juice bar, home-based juice business, or cold-pressed juice delivery company. This podcast is brought to you by Goodnature, the world leader in commercial cold-pressed juicers and juice business consulting. When 100% family-owned business, this was founded in 1976 by our dad, Dale Wettlaufer. We also have Eric Wettlaufer on the call today. What's up, Eric?
Hello, hello.
Forgot to introduce him earlier. If you'd like to send us a comment or question by leaving us a voice message to play on the air, head over to goodnature.com/radio. We have 3 awesome voicemails today. One from Montreal, one all the way from South Africa, and one from California. So happy that the Goodnature family's calling in from all over the world. Always makes me feel warm and tingly inside. All right, so today's episode, we are going to discuss a bit about Olivia's new consulting packages she offers. We're going to talk a bit about, there's a post this week about one of our Goodnature family members switching to 12-ounce bottles. We'll talk about that for a second. And then 2 of the voicemails are at HPP and UV pasteurization. So we'll do kind of a deep dive into the different pasteurization methods. And then also somebody has a question about HACCP plans for a raw juice business. So we got plenty of awesome content this week. Excited to get into it. So I guess first, let's start off. Olivia, by the time this episode is published, we'll have your new consulting packages up for everybody to take a look at. Can you maybe just give us a brief overview of how you'll be helping our customers?
Yeah, so I've been waiting for, like, what's the official news that Olivia's on the Goodnature family. I'm feeling like until it's on the website, I still feel like a little bit of like a step system.
Yeah.
Until I'm official. But yeah, I mean, I think we did a really intensive background search on what folks are looking for, particularly a lot of questions that I get on social media, questions that I get, during JuiceCon and call-ins that we've had as well, to really kind of figure out how I can help operators in the front of the house standpoint, with Chef Ari leading the charge in the back of the house. And for me, obviously, my background is branding. That's what I talk a lot about here on the podcast. And so we do have a really robust branding package that I think is really, really important. And, from my standpoint, is something that you're never too late to get on the ball with branding. So there's a lot of people that I talk to that have already been up and running and just really kind of this happened upon this business, right? Where they were juicing at home, particularly during COVID for family and friends. And then it kind of became this thing. And then it's just like, hey, Olivia's Juice. And, before they know it, they have a full-fledged business and they haven't really had a chance to stop and think about branding. And that's okay. I mean, sometimes it's helpful to have a story first before you start a brand, right? It seems a little bit more authentic than just being like, hey, maybe I should just go start a juice company and then trying to think of a brand that way. So those are some of my favorite clients. But from the other side, when you are starting, it's hard sometimes because you can get so emotionally in love with an idea, right, of your business, of how you think it's going to run before it gets off the ground, that it's going to be all organic, that it's going to be in glass bottles, that it's going to have, my kids' names all over it, and all these things that are important to you. And some of those things, will be true, but really kind of figuring out what your story is, what your kitchen design is going to look like, what your recipe is going to look like, what your menu is going to look like, who your target audience is, and really kind of putting all of those things together and having a real honest conversation with somebody, a third party person who's not emotionally tied to your brand and to your ideas, and who can have a really frank conversation and say, look, you're leaving out part of the market with that conversation. Let's bring it back together and really start to think about who it is that we're trying to sell here too. And so for me, that's the fun. Those are my favorite kinds of packages. So other than branding, then obviously, I'm an owner operator, so I run the shop as well. And so there's a lot of things. Really, I think I'm the only one on the team that runs a shop, right? Like an actual juice shop. And so there with the clients, figuring out what are the difficulties with COVID in terms of what's coming off, what did we order and what didn't come off the truck. Staffing, paying. I know firsthand, how hard it is when months are tough, you want to cut your own salary, or maybe you haven't even started to pay yourself at all. Those are all packages that I have. One in particular that I think a lot of my first-time consultants have been expressing to me is that they're not paying themselves. They're working 30, 40, 50 hours in the juice shop, and they've got nothing to show for it in terms of at the end of the month, they have no paycheck. And maybe they're even, just like, I know one client said that she just takes the business credit card, and when she hasn't had a chance to pay herself, she just buys her own groceries on the credit card. And those are all things that we do, right? When we don't have somebody there to lead the charge and really say, look, this is important. You're a valued person in this business. This is a business. This is not a freaking charity. We have to get you paid, or you're going to be burnt out, and it's going to result in your production and in your communication with your staff and your guests. So we've got everything from a payroll and staffing package to personalized documentation for your business, opening and closing logs, all of those things that help the front of the house run. It can also help with setting up your point of sale system, whichever one you may choose from, and really kind of going through all the different ones and figure out what's best for your business model and how important that is for the back of the house staff. And so really it's, we talk about front of the house and back of the house, but those two houses really have to talk together. So you want to make sure you're setting up your point of sale system in a way that a chef Ari or your back of the house manager or whoever is running the juicer can pull a sales mix and say, these are the things that are selling, these are the things that are not selling, and at the quantity that they're selling, so that we can actually set a production log based on what our numbers in the front say, not the other way around. And I think that's really important from a cost saving standpoint. And then, of course, there's the ever popular increasing revenue and marketing package, which kind of goes hand in hand with that brand. But this is really more about like when you need fast cash, when you need really to just drive some big business, sales are king, right? So what can we do when you're doing the same product day in and day out, to really entice your guests to have some good in-store sales promotions? Maybe it's BOGO, buy one, get one free. Maybe it's a juice happy hour. Maybe it's a 2-for-1 smoothie, holiday cleanses. But I can really help you kind of formulate those. I think that's it. And then branding, of course, getting your logo together and learning what the story is for your brand.
Yeah, and I've seen you work with clients before. I really like your style. It's very hands-on. It's almost like coaching. So
Yeah.
someone comes to you and you're going to help them. It's not just like, oh, here's how you do point of sale. You're going to help them learn about their business, coach them through it, figure out how to increase revenue for their specific business, not just sort of like not just some ebook or something or some information that we give everybody. It's just really hands-on, which is really great.
Right. And I think that's kind of the perk of my experience is that I've been the owner operator of just one shop. I've always had a chef, but there have been seasons in Southern Fresh Juicery where I didn't have a chef, so I had to be the chef. There were seasons where I didn't have a manager, so I had to be the manager, and I had to stock the toilet paper, and I had, so it's like, and not all of my shops are the same volume, so I can help you for a big volume shop, and how to start small and grow big, and what those goals should look like, and how you can do that effectively in a smart way, so that you're You're not 86ing items. You're putting your most profitable items because you've met with Chef Ari and you know how to do food costs on the right place on your menu to help customers always order the items, or at least most of the time order the items that have a better margin for you. So yeah, I love coaching. And every business, even though we're all kind of doing the same thing, they're all different, right? We all have a different purpose and a different target audience. We're in different markets. We're using different machines. Hopefully all Goodnature machines, but we're all different sizes. So together we can figure out the right formula for your business.
Cool. All right. So if anyone wants more information on getting the dream team here, Ari and Olivia, helping you with your business, head over to goodnature.com/radio and fill out the form, and they'll be happy to get on a call with you. Okay, moving on. I saw this post this week from Flourish Juice Co, who's a part of the Goodnature family, really good friends with us, and they've always offered to help out with JuiceCon and just being a valuable resource in the industry. I saw that they posted this week, you asked for 12-ounce bottles with cheaper prices, and they're here. We hope you love your new bottles and more affordable prices. 16-ounce bottles will still be floating around. We get them on bottle returns as they are no longer affordable for our customers or for us to sustain as a business and enjoy. And I just really love this post because they're making a decision as a business. Guys, we have to switch to 12-ounce bottles. Costs have gone up too much. We can't keep raising prices to the level where people can't afford them anymore. So they made a decision. They're sticking to it. And I think, Ari, you mentioned this in previous episode of sort of a trend of going more towards 12-ounce bottles. So I think that's pretty cool to see. But Ari, what is your general philosophy in choosing a bottle size?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. It's something to do. Check out and see if it works for your area. It all comes down to your area, and what is available, what your competition's selling it for, what sizes they have. It's amazing that typically it's 16 ounces. You cut back 2 ounces, and you can have such an aggressive price point on your juices. It's not that you're tricking a customer. You still have the same exact food cost, but it's so much more approachable where you can go from $9, $10 a bottle of juice to maybe $7 or $8. Definitely leads to people buying multiples, and it's a great way to get them to sample the entire menu, branch off. A lot of times people might buy a 16-ounce bottle, drink a little bit. It's a lot of juice. Put it in the fridge, 2 days later, finish it off. Where they have the smaller portions, they can just keep coming back and trying sampling everything. It's a great thing. It works for larger demographic. There's a few cases where it might not, but majority of times experimenting with that smaller portion size is a great way to increase revenue.
Have anything to add on that, Olivia?
Yeah, I mean, this is a conversation that goes on in Southern Patisserie all the time. We do 16-ounce bottles. And I always joke, I mean, I hate that we all have the same bottles because I feel like it's one of those things that just the bottle shapes. There's only like 2 or 3 in the market. And I'm always telling people, I'm like, man, I'm in the wrong business. I should be in the bottle making business, right? Like come up with a funky design and maybe then I would get all the business. But it's one of those things that for us, because we do so much volume, we just haven't made the commitment yet. And so we're so deep in it now. We buy labels by the tens and thousands, right? So like I have thousands and thousands and thousands of labels whose nutritional panels are done on a 16 ounce, whose say, 16 ounce on the bottle. And it's just one of those things where I wish I would have made the decision earlier. I totally see the benefit of it. And listening to you, Chef Ari, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. They would buy multiples, right? Because now it's like, it's a lot easier to buy two $8 juices than it is to buy two $11 juices, right? And a lot of times you'll hear a guest be like, I'll just grab one now and I'll come back later next week. But maybe if the price was lower, it'd be different. It's one of those things that sometimes I feel like the Southern Patisserie train is just going so fast and it's hard to stop it. And maybe it'd be easier with a smaller operation, but also maybe I'm just too non-committed to do it, right? Because I don't know for sure. And it's like, do I really want to stop this whole train? Just check.
One misstep a lot of operations do is just like, oh, some people will like that portion size. Let's offer 16, 12, 8 ounce and all these different sizes. And that's not the route to go. It's rarely the route to go because you have to store all these bottles somewhere. And plus, if you're having 16-ounce bottles, someone wants 8 ounces, you're going to do that extra work and breaking them down. It gets extremely confusing. So the best route is like an 8-ounce and 16-ounce bottle option, or just one 12 or 14-ounce. Don't offer a huge range.
I would say if you're a young operation and you're not into multiple units yet, and you're not into thousands of bottles on stock, that you've promised your distributor you're going to buy, or that you have thousands of labels for, now is the time to really do a test with this and run your food costs really well. If you know how to do it, great. If not, I think do that with Chef Ari, because it can really make an impact on your food costs. What I don't want you to do is go from a 16 ounce to a 12 ounce and keep it at the same price. That's like a huge no-no, and your guests will react to that in a negative way. We do 8 ounces sometimes, Chef, but we mostly will do it for catering events, right? So sometimes, like if people cater us out for breakfast, they have maybe us plus a food item. They don't want a full 16-ounce bottle. And so we'll do an 8 ounce for, often it's like a $5 price.
Yeah, it's perfect.
$5 or $6. And so that's nice. We try not to keep it in the case too much, just because it's a little bit more labor intensive. It takes you a lot longer to fill 8-ounce bottles than it does 16-ounce bottles, right?
Uh-huh.
You would think it would be the opposite, but you have to fill so many more. You have to fill double in order to have a stacked fridge. So it's one that we always offer clients from a catering standpoint. And I always make sure we have 1 or 2 large boxes of 8 ounces. So maybe try doing that. See if that's something that, offering a kid size. That's something that I get asked a lot about, oh, my kid can't drink the whole 16 ounce. Like, okay, well, sorry, so maybe having some 8 ounces around is a good happy medium point.
Eric, do you have any thoughts on if businesses should be thinking about this as, supply chain and produce costs are increasing and stuff?
I mean, as a consumer, I think that 12 ounces is a great size. I'm more likely to try a new juice if it's an 8 ounce or 12 ounce. I mean, I'd be curious what Flourish sees if she sees people buying more juices on average, because adding that 16 ounce, it's kind of a more of a risk. Like, I might not like this juice, or it really is sometimes 2 servings of juice.
Mm-hmm.
When I drink it, I usually drink 10 or 12 ounces out of a big jug. So buying it, it's like I'm buying single servings when I buy 12 ounces. I'll buy 3 instead of maybe 2 bigger bottles. I think it's a good spot. I like also the 8 and 16 because I could try a smaller size. But obviously, like you were talking about, production issues, you have to decide, do I put this in 8 ounces? Do I put this in 16 ounces?
Yeah, now you're managing 2 SKUs for one product pretty much.
Yep.
Yeah, I know some people do little sampler, 4 ounce with, I don't have enough for a 16. I'll do 3 of these 4 ounces, and they're add a few to your order and try different juices thing. But that always seemed really hard for people to be able to count on getting those. I think what
I always
you're doing
thought
is,
it was.
Yeah.
I just thought it was fun when you go to a juice bar and they have juice flights, so you can buy a couple ounces of a bunch of different ones. I really like that. And I think, and when there's an option there, I don't feel like they need to offer free sampling because you can just buy the samples, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a cool idea.
I wonder if they would be willing to kind of track their sales and report back and tell us, how was it received?
Mm-hmm.
How are sales for 12 ounces? Have they seen any dip in sales, or have they seen an increase in some? But that just might be a good, not that it's a one size fit all, but since they're doing it right now, it might just be kind of interesting for the listeners to hear how it went for them.
I'm sure Caitlin would pop on the podcast next week if
that'd be awesome.
It's available. I'll make a note.
Yeah, and you also have to maybe you just can't get 16 ounce bottles right now. I don't even know what the glass shortages. You have to be able to produce consistently, and when things are short, the price goes up.
Yeah, and once you maybe they're facing an issue where we're gonna have to raise the price to $12 a bottle if we want to keep selling 16 ounce, and that's just not really possible in the area, Yeah, that's a good point though. I'll see if you can come on next week. Okay, moving on. So we have a question from the Goodnature family here.
Hey, Goodnature Radio. This is Rebecca from Riverside, California. I am having some issues with writing a HACCP plan, and I wanted to know if you guys have any advice or resources for someone who's trying to write a HACCP plan for raw juice in the farmers market industry. So that's where we're at right now. We are currently looking into renting a kitchen and just wanted to know if you have any advice.
Well, all Ari does all day is write HACCP plans. So, Ari, why don't you kick
Take it,
this one
Ari.
off?
Sometimes at night too, you know. Yeah, the first thing I always recommend people become HACCP certified. There's online courses. If you're lucky enough to be in an area where they have it in person, take that because that's going to be a requirement regardless. And you're just starting understanding what HACCP actually is. The second step is what you're doing. Try to write it on your own. You know, we have a sample on our blog post. It's not very easy to understand, you know, because everything's foreign on the right. And I mean, everything's abbreviated. You know, you got HACCP, SOP, you got PIC, everything's abbreviated. So it's extremely confusing, but just jumping right in and trying to write it on your own, you start learning all the verbiage and abbreviations and everything. After that, I mean, reach out, shoot me an email. I'll go through the process, kind of see where you're stuck. If you need my assistance, I'll be more than happy to help you out, guide you, be able to write it for you if you wanted. But I mean, if you're writing it on your own, it's definitely pretty challenging. I'll be able to help you out with whatever you're stuck with. You know, there's a lot of nuances with it, but HACCP plan is a great thing to have. It's definitely frustrating initially when you're writing it on your own, learning it. It seems like a lot overwhelming. There's a lot of little tricks that can help you out, make it extremely easy. And at the end of the day, your operation is going to be that much better. Not only from a safety and standpoint, you're going to have that traceability piece where, say someone gets sick from your product, you'll have all these documents to be able to verify you handle that product properly. You know, having the concentration of the antimicrobial wash, how long it took you to cool down the juice. You have all those steps, but also from a processing standpoint, it helps you kind of stand back from the process and make sure you're doing everything properly. Because if you're making juice every single day, same routine, you turn into kind of like a robot, making it same process, and doing those logs kind of helps you verify you're at the right temp, concentration, and everything. And it definitely leads to a more consistent product at the end. But I mean, just reach out. I'll be able to walk you through what you might need assistance with.
As a farmer's market standpoint, are there any additional things you need to worry about in a HACCP plan as opposed to just making juice and selling it right out of a juice bar?
Yeah. So the biggest thing with HACCP is 99% of it is stuff you're already doing, except it's put into a standard sanitation operating procedure and verified with a log. You might have additional logs that you might not be doing. And the HACCP plan is typically should be always required when you transport your juice. So you're in your kitchen making your juice, and if you're not selling it directly from that kitchen to your consumers, as soon as that capped bottle of juice leaves that facility, that's when it's required. So the one thing that might be different from that HACCP to the farmer's market is having the sanitation standard operating procedure for the transportation of the juice, you know, where it's just basically taking the time and temp where you made it and time and temp at the farmer's market and taking that every 4 hours. You'll also probably be required to sending samples to a lab to test for the 5 major pathogens. Sounds really complicated, confusing, but it's really easy. I use a company called Certified Laboratories. There's tons out there. And basically you just overnight them a small 1 ounce sample, put it in whatever container you like, and they'll run the test for those 5 major pathogens, make sure it's clear, and give you the approval for that part too.
Cool. Does anyone have anything to add about HACCP, or should we move on to HPP?
I have a question for Ari. That the juice transportation part of the HACCP plan, does that apply if you're doing delivery? Like if you're delivering to your customers?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it can, if kind of a way around having a HACCP and a transport log, a lot of operations do is use a third party, like DoorDash, Uber Eats, stuff like that. Because as soon as they pass off that juice, they're not responsible for it. They're responsible for it to a certain point. So if you are doing the delivery yourselves, then you would be required to have that transportation log for sure.
And Ari, who comes back and checks your HACCP plan? Like, I know you have to have your HACCP plan for Department of Health, but I don't know that anybody has ever asked me for my HACCP plan once I got open. Maybe they have, Chef, and I just am not aware of it. But is it something that you pull back up?
Yeah, the local inspection agency, whoever does that for your area, they'll typically approve the HACCP plan initially, and then if you're modifying it, they call it a living document. Basically, you could adjust it, add stuff, take stuff out once a year, and then you'll just submit a new plan, write the revisions, and they'll approve it again. But essentially, you just kind of get that approved, and then once a year, they'll probably verify it. It depends, too, on the funding for your local inspection agency. A lot of places are actually underfunded, but the ones that are properly funded will have a special department that specializes just in that.
And is that coming out of Department of Ag, or is that coming out of Department of Health?
It depends. It changes. So
Gotcha.
In Vegas, it was Department of Health. I've seen Department of Ag quite often. So it just depends on who the inspection agency is.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Ari, is there like a most commonly missed thing on a HACCP plan that you see, since you've seen so many people implement them?
Yeah, a lot.
Well, like, is there anything surprising that's on? Yeah.
Yeah. pH. There's a sanitation standard operating procedure for pH, and it's kind of odd. I'd say half the time, every time I include it in a HACCP plan, they say it's not needed, and then when I don't have it, they say add it on. So that's kind of the one procedure where I always add it, and they always tell me to remove it later. So just to be on the safe side, I add that one. But yeah.
Yeah, and I know we keep mentioning ServSafe course. I took ServSafe in person. I know you can take it online, but I took it in person at UNLV. And I would say I found it super interesting and learned a lot. And I just use it at home, like storing my food and cleaning the kitchen, or like you actually learn a lot. I found it really interesting. So I know we've suggested taking the course, but I really recommend it. And then you become certified. They give you a certificate. So then you're the person at your business that's actually certified in the safe handling of food and beverage and stuff. So I definitely recommend taking a course. I think take it in person if you can, but I know they offer it online as well. And
you have to have, and I don't know about in other states, but at least in South Carolina and North Carolina, where we operate, you have to have somebody on staff at all times who's ServSafe certified. So you always want to have your managers or your kitchen staff have at least 2 people on your staff, an AM and a PM.
Yeah, and it really does make you an expert in food safety. So I think it's a great investment.
And that's the thing with HACCP too. Even if you're not required to have it, I recommend having it. It just it gives you so much a benefit from having it and getting it out of the way and being a step ahead. With that consistent product, having an extremely safe product with that traceability piece as well.
Cool. All right, let's move on. We've got a question about the nutrients in HPP juice. It's all the way from South Africa.
Hi guys, Maxie from South Africa. Just a question around the HPP pasteurization process. Is the nutritional integrity of the juice at 45 days still the same? Because that's the question I think we are all encountering around pasteurization is, yes, it extends the shelf life, but what about the nutritional profile of the juices?
So I wrote an article a couple of years ago called The Truth About HPP. It's on our blog. And this is one of the things I researched. I'm sharing my screen here for the people listening. I'll read it out loud. But I said one of the myths about HPP is that it doesn't affect nutritional enzyme content. And I've researched all the studies that are publicly available I could find. So this is what I wrote in the article. According to some studies, HPP has at least minor effect on nutrient content with, quote, remaining content in the range of 87% to 100%. Enzyme residual activity varies depending on the enzyme being tested and the settings of the HPP process, with majority of residual activity levels, quote, lying in the 20% to 60% range. It should also be noted that these tests were done immediately after the HPP process, and whether these numbers hold up over several weeks later is questionable. Nutrients in raw juice begin to break down in a matter of days, so I assume this is the same with HPP juice. However, I cannot find any data on this, so it's only my opinion. So I wrote this a couple years ago, and I still haven't seen any studies, at least made public, that have actually taken a batch of juice, analyzed it raw, analyzed it after HPP, and then analyzed it again like a month later. I haven't seen any of that. So if anyone else has seen studies, please let me know. Like, I know someone at a big juice company told me they've done internal studies and all the nutrients are still there a month later. But I feel like if that were true, why aren't those studies public? Like, why are they just internal? So I don't know. Ari, do you have anything to add on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough without actual testing. You know, I've done nutrient testing before, quite often actually, with the certified laboratories and with the scientists and stuff that examine it. And the only thing I learned is the vitamins and nutrients are all different. They all react to heat, cool, everything separately. So if I was to do an educated guess on it, anything to apply that much pressure to kill the 5 major pathogens, it's got to have some effect on those nutrients. You know, what it is, I don't know. That's a question, you know.
Also, the juice does actually heat up a little bit in HPP. I write about that in the article too, where as it's under pressure, it does actually increase in temperature, and they hold it there for a few minutes. And then as the pressure is released, it immediately comes back down to being cold again. So that's also another myth that there's no heat involved. It's called adiabatic heating, and they say it's different because it's not like thermal heat, but it does heat up a little bit. So if you put it in at like 45 degrees, then it can get up to about 75 to 80 degrees for a few minutes.
I mean, it's still heat, but it's still warmer. It's just when you crush it down, the heat is, you know, in a smaller package, and then you open it back up and it cools back down again. But it compresses anyway, not getting too much into the weeds, but it does heat up a bit during the process.
It's okay, we can get in the weeds.
Yeah, so I've like stood there when stuff gets HPP'd before. And like it changes it a little bit, just the flavor of the juice. It's like still really good juice, but it's a little different, like a little, maybe not so much of the high notes, or like I don't know, tastes more sort of flat. But you know, 4 days later, it's way better than the raw juice. And like 8 days later, you wouldn't even drink the raw juice probably, because it's just not as active anymore. But it's a processing step, and like any processing step, you can do it a little bit minimally processed, or you can take it further. And there are people that do more HPP, longer hold, higher temperature, and there's people that do minimal HPP. Like there's food scientists that come when you're getting into HPP machines that test your product, the pH, how long do you want to hold it, what log reduction are you going for, and they design for you the profile that your HPP machine does. So it's not all HPP process is the same. Maybe it's more standard now because there's so many tolling facilities. But you can like do more intense HPP if you want, and then that's more processed.
I've heard almond milk. Remember, there's that big issue where they pulled all the HPP almond milk off the shelves because the pH was too low or too high.
It was
too high.
Not acidic enough.
Yeah, it wasn't acidic enough. This is what the FDA said, to sell it using HPP. So they pull it off and then do a bunch of studies. And now I heard that they hold it for up to 40 minutes in the HPP chamber, in the hyperbaric chamber.
Wow.
So at that point, it's like, aren't you kind of just heat pasteurizing it? if it's warmer for 40 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, to make something last 45 days, you're putting it through a processing step, and it's just different. It's still fruits and vegetables, and it's still juice, and it's still good for you. But it's just, I don't think it'd be fair to say that you can test a few specific nutrients and conclusively say this juice is just as good as or just as good as it was the day it got put in, because there's, so many different things that are so hard to test. And also, like, sometimes you freeze the juice to send it to the testing lab, and does that change it? It's really hard to get like a good test of in the moment what's happening.
Yeah, I agree.
I'll say when we started doing HPP, we have a line of juices that are high pressure pasteurized, and then things that are juiced in house that are not. So we have both offerings. And for us, I would say that we're still really in the testing phase, because really for us it was I talked about this on the last episode, but it was just a quantity standpoint. Like, we just couldn't keep up with the demand in our back of the house, even with both of our X1s. And so we really just needed help producing. And we do a really low hold of only like 3 to 4 seconds. So that's something that makes me feel a little bit better from that standpoint. Like even last night, I was answering DMs on the Southern Press Juicery page of a husband, and then his wife, sent a message that she was pregnant, and she was really adamant that only have pasteurized juice. So it does have its benefits in terms of guest facing and people that really feel like they have a reason to have something that's taken any risk of the 5 pathogens out. I will say that, for us, we were able to label ours at a 45-day shelf life. We decided to label it at a 30-day shelf life just to be on the safe side. We just wanted people to get it in and get it out. And that caused a problem, right? Where we weren't receiving it. And so really we said, okay, stick it at 30-day, even though it was tested to go to a 45-day, and then we wouldn't get it until it was like 25 days. And so now I'm like, right, because it's like coming on the truck, right? And so it was kind of screwing with my ability to turn around and sell it, particularly to wholesale accounts. And so now we just moved it to the 45-day shelf life. And then we started talking to the, to the facility and really started kind of analyzing, well, like, okay, help me understand, like, why does it stop at 45 days? So obviously they test all of your recipes, right? And the pH levels and all of those things. They send them off to a lab, just like Chef said, and they test. And so the standard is 45 days. If you have an ingredient that's different, right? Doesn't have basically fit in this umbrella of recipes that have been tested, or these umbrella of ingredients that have been tested, you can ask for a variance, right, Chef? And so they could possibly take some of them up to 90 days. It just really depends on the pathogens and, what ingredients are in there. But one of the things that they always talk about, they never come back and talk about what the nutritional integrity of the juice is. They only the only thing they're testing for is the risk of any pathogens
right, microbial shelf life.
Microbial shelf life. Like it's never like, hey, Olivia, yes, this will go to a 60-day, but this is what's going to happen to your nutrition. That's just simply what they're not testing. And so I think that's probably the reason why there aren't any white papers on it, is it's just not part of that study. It's just not what those scientists are really concerned about. They're only concerned about the danger of it. And so I don't know how we could find somebody that could turn it around and flip it and test the nutritional content. Because obviously for us as the distributors of that juice, that's the part that is just equally as important as the danger, making sure that it's not dangerous, taking it to that shelf life. But unfortunately, that data is just not out there like we would like it to be.
Yeah. Yeah. So Maxie, thank you for the question. Unfortunately, I think there needs to be more studies done. It's something I've been thinking about for a long time, but I just can't wrap my head around how we'd actually do it, because you need to make the raw juice. You do a test of the sample of the raw, and then you need to find an HPP facility that'd be willing to just like HPP a small batch of juice for you or something, so that you can send it to a lab. And I don't know, I feel like it'd be hard to get the cooperation. But if anyone listening is aware of any other studies that I haven't seen, please let us know. I would love to get some more information on that. All right, and then sticking with the theme of pasteurization, let me play this next voicemail here.
Hi, Charlie. I'm Melanie from La Station Organique in Montreal, Quebec. We are looking to extend our shelf life of our juice, and I'm very attracted to this method that they use in Toronto. It's with a UV light. I wanted to know if what do you think of this?
Eric, do you want to just give a brief overview? It sounds like that message might have got cut off, but do you want to give a brief overview of how UV pasteurization works?
Yeah, sure. So basically, you use UV light. You shine really bright UV light that's set to a specific wavelength that the radiation targets and kills the microbial stuff you don't want. So it's at like a certain bandwidth where things like E. coli and whatever that you're trying to target, those are exposed to this UV light. It messes with their DNA or something, and they stop reproducing or splitting or however that works. I'm not a biologist, I don't understand it, but the UV light kills the bad stuff in your juice. There's a couple things about, so it's light, first of all, so your juice has to be kind of like free of turbidity or like chunks, or it can't be thick or super dark, because the harder it is for light to shine through, the harder it is for light to, it's like on the dark side of the thing floating in there. If the light's shining here, it's not shining on this side of a piece of turbidity. So the easiest thing to UV treat is water. It's a really common way to treat water because it's like no chemical, no filter. You just shine the light on it. And there is a lot of UV processing done in like small scale cider production. There was a brand, Cidersure or something. We've seen them from time to time. It's one of the simpler ways to pasteurize, one of the cheaper upfront costs of pasteurization because it's like light bulbs and a filter. But yeah, that's basically top level view how it works.
Yeah, so if you have a single product like cider that's pretty consistent and you can do your validation study with the UV light, then it works pretty well. It gets really hard. They also use it in wine, I've heard a lot. Because again, it's a consistent product. You can dial in the settings. It's really hard to use in a business where you're doing lots of different juice recipes that have different consistencies and different how translucent they are.
It's also like, so the way that it works too is you pump it through the machine. So your juice gets pumped through a machine. You kind of need a big batch of juice because you lose the first bit of it and you lose the last bit of it. It's pumping through pipes and stuff. It's not like HPP where you can take one bottle of juice and put it in the HPP machine in bottle. It's inline processing. So you have to have a big enough batch to start the system up, get a steady state, and then flush the system out. So I don't know, you'd probably need at least like 50 or 100 gallons or something to even consider running a batch through UV treatment.
Yeah, I get questions a lot about, hey, what's a small HPP system I can buy? Or what's a small UV system I can buy? And they just don't really exist. Like when you're...
They don't exist. It's still like a submarine. It's literally like the size of a submarine HPP machine. Even the small ones.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 80,000 PSI. I've seen one like taken apart out in the open, and the amount of like wires and pumps, and it's like, looks like it's from the Matrix or something. Just so many things to build this high pressure vessel, and the walls are like this thick because it's under so much pressure. So if you built a little one, it'd still be, I don't know, it has to be at least $500,000.
And they're always breaking down the budget. Somebody that owns a large juice company that owns HPP machines told me the budget for maintenance on a single HPP machine is $100,000 a year.
Wow.
So just fixing it every time it goes down, replacing the pumps, and
a lot of companies have two because one can be in service and one can be on the floor, being calibrated, or like you have to replace the pressure vessel of it and stuff. It's really crazy. So there's HPP, which is really common in our industry, the cold pressed juice industry, because it's kind of like minimal pasteurization. It's still pasteurization, but it doesn't affect the flavor, especially like of greens. Greens don't do well with heat. HPP, UV, we don't see that used much because it's not in bottle. You need so much volume to get it through. There's something called PEF, which I've seen one company in Europe doing. It's
pulsed electric field.
Yeah, they like shock the juice and it ruptures the cells of the microbes or something. That's another inline where you pump it through this thing. Never really took off. There's like, they use it in wastewater treatment and stuff. And then there's heat, the classic heat, which you heat it up and cool it down. You can do that in bottle. So you could actually like get some hot water in your sink at home, and one of your bottles has a thermometer in it, and you put them all in there, and the hot water works its way in, and then the bottles are pasteurized. There's a lot of like craft cider makers and stuff that do that. And then there's bigger machines that are inline where you pump through and get to a certain temperature. But all of those things you can take to the high end of heat and time and shelf stable, or really to the low end of just doing enough to get your 5-log reduction. And then there's chemical. You can add stuff like Velcorin and what preservatives and stuff.
Velcorin isn't. Well, okay, I won't say it's nasty stuff. I don't want to get sued. In my opinion, Velcorin is
something you don't have to put on the label, and you don't have to tell people you're putting in the juice, but you can pour this stuff in your juice that kills what's in it and then dissipates to whatever they say. So that's why they don't have to put on the label. But you can have no ingredients added. You can just take your juice, dump the stuff in it, and it's approved.
So this stuff is a chemical that has to be handled wearing like a full like hazmat suit looking thing. And when you put it in your beverage, they call it dosing the beverages. But then they don't have to put it on the label because it breaks down to organic compounds that don't quote unquote like change the nutritional value of the juice. That's all the FDA cares about. They're like, is what you're putting in the juice changing the nutritional value of it? If the answer is no, you don't even have to put it on the ingredient list. So it's pretty scary. Like processing aids, you don't have to list on the ingredient list. So a lot of times
enzymes and stuff.
And that stuff is used frequently in orange juice and wine and like canned,
Apple
I think even
cider.
some canned seltzers and cider use this Velcorin stuff, and it's not on the label, and it's like a very hazardous chemical.
Yeah.
But I mean, just so I don't get sued, I'll say that they do say it breaks down organic compounds that aren't harmful. So.
Yeah, that's why they don't have to put it on a label, because it ends up being stuff that's in the juice already, like CO2, or I don't even know what it turns into. But by the time it's finished reacting, it's okay. But I'd still believe if you put something into your juice, you should put it on a label. It's like a principle that we have.
Yeah, it seems like it should. But you go to these, we've been to these big trade shows, right, in the beverage industry, and it's amazing how much of the floor where all the vendors are is for quote unquote clean label stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff you don't have to put on the label. These Chinese
like
companies.
Hand you a sample, it'd be like, guess what you just ate? Like, I don't want to know. They're like, you don't even have to put on the label. Like, oh my God.
It's really creepy. Like
the food technology shows are crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the whole industry, the food and beverage industry is basically about tricking the consumers. That's like pretty much the whole thing.
The big corporate side of it, yeah.
Yeah. Like, how can we market this as being good for you? That's it. They don't care about if it's actually good for you or not. Just like, how can we make it seem good for you? What do you have that we can extend the shelf life without putting it on the label?
Who was I talking to the other week where a lot of those HPP product, they'll label it consume after 3 days of opening, you know, and it's like, nothing will happen, but
there's a very large, very famous juice company.
So that they'll go through it, right? So they'll drink the juice, and not because of any nutritional value other than just hurry up, drink it so that you can order some more.
No, I also just think it's so it appears to be raw. Like they say, better drink it because it's raw,
right?
Without saying it's raw. Like tell me it's raw without saying it's raw, right? That's pretty much what they're doing, I think. Like consume immediately after opening.
Right.
But yeah, it doesn't make a difference.
Even though it doesn't have an expiration date on it.
Yeah, I mean there's a brand of juice with the word raw in the name. I'm not going to say the whole name of the brand, but it's the word raw is in the name, and it's HPP juice. And then there's a large national brand that ships HPP juice, doesn't put HPP on the label, and says like consume after 3 days. It's just very, very intentionally confusing, in my opinion.
Yeah, that goes back to a point about like big industry trying to trick consumers. There was this whole period of time where HPP was like a secret.
Mm-hmm.
And it was originally high pressure pasteurization, and then it was cold pressured for a while. Then
it went from high pressure pasteurization to high pressure processing to pascalization to cold pressured. Like they just keep changing the name.
Cold pressed, yeah.
Yeah, they just keep changing the name to try to confuse everybody into thinking it's like not processed and then it's raw.
And then people were asking us like, "Do you sell cold pressured machines?" Well,
yeah, it's so confusing now because so much stuff is labeled cold pressured when they're talking about high pressure processing that people are actually confused and think that's what cold pressed juice is. So they'll call us and be like, "I want to buy one of your HPP machines." Like, we don't sell them HPP machines because they think a juice press is an HPP machine because they did such a good job at confusing the whole industry into thinking that HPP juice is raw juice.
I mean, I think HPP juice serves an absolute important part of the juice industry because you just can't move raw juice around or keep it in your bag at the gym. It's just too perishable. So I buy HPP juice a lot, and I think it's an important thing to offer. People should just be transparent about, this is different than this stuff. This is our raw stuff. This is HPP. And I think it's like raw juice is the best. HPP is a close second. That's how I feel.
I agree. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's and you have to trust the place you're buying raw juice.
I still buy it. Yeah. Some people who use process tolling facilities that do HPP, it's hard to get the juice to the tolling facility quick and cold, and then maybe it sits on the floor there. So I think if you're going to be doing HPP, it's best to let them make the juice at their facility for you. A lot of them offer that as well, just so that there's the transit to the place is not even a factor.
Yeah, you'll need 2 HACCP plans.
Yeah.
One to get to the processing facility, and then there's when they process it, and it gets.
Yeah, I interviewed. Sorry, just one more thing to add here. I interviewed Joyce Longfield a couple years ago on my Cold Press Truth podcast, and she is like an absolute industry expert in HPP. I recommend everybody go back and listen to it. We talked for like an hour and a half about HPP, the good, the bad, everything. And she said, yeah, it's also super important to make sure you're choosing a responsible HPP tolling facility because some will let your juice sit out for a week before they process it. So it's already bad by the time it goes in. And it's been sitting out warm, went bad, turned brown, and it's already ruined because there's microbial shelf life and there's sensory shelf life. Sensory shelf life is the taste and color and smell and everything. And that goes bad a lot faster than the microbial shelf life. So if they let it sit out for a few days before they even process it, the sensory shelf life is already destroyed.
I was just going to say too, I think this is true for everywhere in the country, but Charlie, you guys probably know better than I do. But at least for where I produce, you are not technically allowed to wholesale your juice to other people that's raw and unpasteurized, right? And so particularly if you've built a really big brand for yourself around town, like Southern Press Juicery has, for us, it's really a risky business to be a household name in our town, not be pasteurizing our juice, and have really strong wholesale partners. Because at any point, anybody could, set the fire alarms off and turn us in for wholesaling unpasteurized juice. And so for us, that was really a big deal too. Now, of course, we did, as most juice bars around the world do, because it's such a limiting factor to only be able to sell your product direct to the consumer. So if you're making the product in house and you're selling direct to the consumer, it doesn't have to be pasteurized. But the second you introduce that product to somebody else and they're handing off that juice, it needs technically legally to be pasteurized. So for us, it was also just a liability standpoint of being a really recognizable brand around town and knowing in our gut that we weren't pasteurizing and having, really large scale wholesale accounts. Now they weren't, a Whole Foods or something like that, but they were large, locally owned, businesses around town that were also very visible. So it was just like, okay, how long are we going to play this game of is anybody going to turn us in? And so that was part of our decision to go with an HPP line as well. And like I said, I may come on in 3 episodes and say, hey, we pulled HPP, we tried and it wasn't right for us. But for at least where we are in our business right now, it's been worth it to at least, try it and see if it causes more of a problem from us from a business model than it does help us.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I'm not trying to demonize HPP. I think it's a very important technology. And when you are selling wholesale, if you're selling raw juice, it is quite risky because you don't know if they're handling it properly. Like once you sell it to a grocery store or a market or a cafe or whatever, they may not sell it right away and not pull it off the shelf when they're supposed to. So I think HPP is important for the wholesale industry, especially when selling to large grocery stores. It's on a truck for 3 days, then it's in a grocery store. Like, I'm happy that HPP exists so I can buy juice at Whole Foods while I'm shopping, And
and you never know what their temperature of their refrigerators are. Right?
That's what I'm saying, though. That's what I'm saying.
Their temps could be hanging out at 40, 41. I mean, what is it, Chef? It has to be at. Your fridges
below
have
41.
to be at below 41. Yeah, so they could be hanging out at 44 degrees for 5 days, and your produce is in there.
Yeah. Now, what I do want to demonize is the tricky labeling. That's what I hate. Like, I have no problem with anyone
very anti that
using HPP, but it's like, put it on the label, make it clear so people have a right to choose if they want to drink HPP or raw. Like, the FDA hasn't decided that that's necessary to regulate processing steps. Like, you're not required to put pasteurized. There's one, for some reason, orange juice you're required to say if it's pasteurized, but I don't think anything else. So, but they have decided we have a right to know nutrition facts and ingredients, but they haven't said that about actual processing steps yet. So you can't actually be sure by the label. So that's why I just think it's a violation of trust, and it really hurts the industry when brands are dishonest. Because then when the consumer learns that they've been tricked, they just end up not trusting the juice industry after that. So then it makes you, as Southern Press Juicery owner, job harder, because now you're trying to say your juice is worth $8 or $9,
right?
But they feel like they've been lied to in the past. So why should they pay that much for juice? I just think it's, as long as the labeling is truthful and honest, I think that anything is fine, as long as you're just giving consumers the knowledge they have to make a choice over what they want to be consuming.
Yeah, really. And so you just have to go a step further and do more than what's required, because I think that like what you're saying is there's so little that's required anymore for our labels, and they can hide, things that are really bad for you under, key words like natural flavors and not tell you what the hell a natural flavor is. But so I just think, in general, I think most of us came to this industry because we want to do good for other people, and we believe in the wholesome product and the power of juice. And so, just make sure that your brand always aligns with why we all came here to begin with. And that's, if your story changes, look, I mean, that's part of what's happened to us too. Like, your brand is going to evolve, maybe not all the way into HPP, but it could evolve into, maybe you started out with juices and then you went to smoothies or whatever. But as your brand evolves, you have to be honest with your community and really tell them, hey, we're learning, we're growing, we're got too big for that, so we're doing this now, just like the first caller did with their glass bottles. I think that's just what we're saying here is whatever steps, measures you take as you make decisions along your journey, you have to do more than what the FDA requires us to do, which is just tell your guest what the hell is going on. What's in that bottle?
Yeah, I was going to say there is some cool stuff going on though with the HPP industry, and some cool inventions too. I follow the Flourish Juice. They actually use a special type of keg, which is kind of cool. That's built to go through the HPP process.
Cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. So that they could do, not use as many bottles and set up in kind of kegs. It was really cool. And another thing I saw, which is kind of crazy, not to give anyone ideas and stuff, but there's actually a way for citrus where you can kind of low budget pasteurize it. Now you got to get approval, okay? But it's actually kind of a loophole in the process. Not really a loophole, but basically you could set up a sink or a compartment that can actually hit a certain temperature, and you could actually put the citrus in there, you know, lemons, oranges, grapefruits, for a certain amount of time. Temperature on the outside gets a certain temperature, and then you pull it. The juice tastes exactly like fresh juice, but after you process it, it's considered pasteurized.
So you do it already in the bottle, is what you're saying?
No, you
do it to the actual
the skin.
citrus.
You essentially sous vide the citrus
and then you
at
put
a
it
certain
through the
temperature.
press.
Then you juice it, and that
got
product is considered pasteurized. But
Wow.
that requires a special HACCP plan.
Sure.
And that's only for citrus because it has the peel.
Only for citrus.
Probably because of the pH, yeah.
Yeah, mostly because how the actual citrus is. You know, it's completely encased in the peel. Whereas an apple, the stem, it can actually go inside, but the stem has its perfect protection, I guess, where you could actually pasteurize the outside of it, juice it, and then, yeah. So don't just go do that. You got to get approval. You got to get special HACCP. Yeah, and you got to get approval before you do that. So, but it works great.
Interesting. I'm just pulling up the. So we mentioned Velcrin earlier as the additive. So the real name for it is dimethyl dicarbonate, a colorless liquid and a
nicer.
A colorless liquid and a pungent odor at high concentration at room temperature is primarily used as a beverage preservative, processing aid, or sterilant, being highly active against typical beverage spoiling microorganisms like yeast, bacteria, or mold. And if you go to the, I'm trying to find the actual chemical. There's like CDC has. Look at this. So this is the stuff they're putting in your juice. Fire, highly flammable. Explosion, vapor/air mixtures are explosive. Inhalation, cough, eyes, redness. You have to wear safety goggles when you touch this stuff. Physical dangers. The vapor is heavier than air and may travel along the ground. Distant ignition possible. The vapor mixes well with air. Explosive mixtures are formed easily. God, crazy.
I've juiced some really strong ginger. I feel like that would apply too. Coughing, red eyes, explosive.
Clear the room.
The big industry for you.
Absolutely.
The Velcrin.
All right, this was a great episode. I think we really did sort of a deep dive into HPP and touched on UV and stuff. So thank you everybody for joining. Just as a reminder, Goodnature family, thank you so much for leaving us the voice messages. It really gives us a lot to talk about on these episodes. If you want to leave us one or you want to get in touch with Ari or Olivia, you can do that at goodnature.com/radio. Everybody have a great weekend and see you next week. Peace.
Hi, guys.
This week I did it my way. Baby say, oh, now let's have some fun. There is nothing greater than Fridays at Goodnature.